Welcome back, everybody. Silicon Slopes has put Utah on the international map in the last 20 years.
And Elle Griffin joins us now to tell us about an exciting newsletter that just launched to continue discussions of future business. Welcome. We're so happy to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with Silicon Slopes. If we're not familiar, will you introduce and explain that to us?
Yeah, so Silicon Slopes is a nonprofit organization that supports the tech scene in Utah. So it's been a really fun organization in terms of putting on events and making sure that everybody's hired and having job fairs and things like that.
And with this new endeavor, a newsletter, what is the purpose? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so we just launched a new publication called The Post, and it's a collective of 5 different newsletters. You can subscribe to whichever ones you like, and then you get weekly newsletters from those writers. So we have 5 newsletters a week. It's actually 4 newsletters plus a podcast. I write a newsletter every Monday called New Capitalism about how business will evolve in the future. My colleague Emily Fonesbach is writing a newsletter on Tuesdays called Techish, and it's kind of a mom exploring the tech that her kids will face in the future. Chris Rawl is writing a column every Wednesday called Serious Business, and it's about kind of the business culture and kind of pushing up against some of those norms. And then Clint Betts, who's the CEO of Silicon Slopes, writes a newsletter every Thursday called The Utahn, which is the kind of Utah specific perspective. And then I host a podcast on Fridays called Postmodern that talks about the future.
Okay, that's so interesting because I thought, will this pertain? But you just said something that pertains to everybody.
Yeah.
Your background, you've been in Utah business for a long time, now writing for Silicon Slopes.
Yeah.
And talk to me about how media is changing.
Yeah, so I think there was, in the past you followed a publication, but now we're just finding that people follow people directly now. I mean, if you want to know what's going on with Elon Musk, you can just follow him directly on Twitter. You don't need to listen to what the Washington Post has to say about Elon Musk. And I just think that that's kind of what we're seeing the future of media head towards, is this focus on, I'm just following a person, I'm not following a brand. So that's what we tried to do when we launched this publication. We didn't want it to be, you're following the Post. We wanted it to be, you're following Elle Griffin's newsletter, New Capitalism. You're following Chris Rawls' newsletter, Serious Business. So we wanted to create very specific, you're following a person and you can unsubscribe from whichever ones you don't want to receive.
And so what is the mission of the Post? What is your hope?
So we want to explore how business can shape our future. So in the past, Silicon Slopes had a publication that focused on business news. Now we're not so much covering what's going on with businesses. We're covering where we should take it. What is the future business? What should executive pay look like? How should profits should be used in business? How, is business culture still relevant? Do we need to have a culture at our company? So these are the kind of things we're thinking through.
And what would you say to somebody who maybe isn't in that world or who is curious to learn about that world and this maybe seems a little intimidating? You say still sign up.
Yeah, I think that's the point, is you can sign up if it's interesting to you. And I think that business is very relevant to everybody, because if you have money, if you have a house, if you have the ability to put food on your table, that means you have access to work. And so work is this thing that is powering, billions of people around the world, and it's worth looking at and figuring out if we're doing it the right way.
What is your podcast about? Are you bringing in guests, or do you already have a topic lined up?
So the podcast Postmodern is a narrative style podcast, like kind of in the vein of an NPR podcast. So it's not an interview. I do interview people, but then what we put together is a scripted podcast that talks about, kind of uses a piece of technology as a metaphor. So for example, our first episode was about flying cars, and that's we kind of use that as a metaphor for what kind of future we want to have. Do we want to live in this kind of George Jetson future? What do we want it to look like? And we have another one coming out this week about humanoid robots. So we're kind of using that Tesla bot as a metaphor for how tech heavy do we want our lives to become.
Sounds so interesting. Where do we follow along, sign up for what we want to follow with?
It's just thepost.org.
Easy
Perfect.
enough. That information on your screen right there. We'll put a link on ours, and you're also on social media, Instagram, and of course LinkedIn, because you're all about business.
Yes. Thank you so much.